Today saw the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, the police officer who last year murdered George Floyd. Going into it, nobody was really sure exactly what sentence he would get, considering the stance of the criminal justice system on police officers who kill while on duty. That said, here is what was announced.
As sentence for count one, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You're granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis.
So that is the big news, 22 and a half years of which he will have to serve at least 2/3, meaning that in theory, within 15 years, he could be released from prison. And so there's a lot else going on here that I want us to talk about, but I do want to get your responses to what the sentence ended up being. Bearing in mind, of course, that he is not done with his time in the legal system. There's other federal charges, other cops who are involved in the situation will be going through their own process as well. But Adrienne, I wanted to start with you. When you heard the numbers, what was your response?
Well, the reality is that no amount of time is going to be sufficient to give justice here for George Floyd and his murder. At the same time, I do fully appreciate that Judge Cahill did give an additional 10 years on top of essentially what the sentencing guidelines set that bar to be as 12 and a half years. So now making that 22 and a half. I think that was a strong showing, as much as the prosecution wanted 30 years and also that the Floyd family wanted 40 years. 22 and a half is it's pretty significant, especially when we're looking at a situation where a police officer has murdered a citizen in the line of duty. But still, it wouldn't really matter in terms of actual justice, as nothing will compensate for the loss of George Floyd.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Adrienne. I mean, based on other murder trials that I've covered, it seems like this was about right, 22 and a half months. I was really glad that the judge mentioned that Chauvin had abused his authority as a police officer. That was very important. I was also glad to see that he recognized the cruelty of those 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So look, to Adrienne's point, nothing's gonna bring back George Floyd. Nothing's gonna satisfy his now 7-year-old daughter who keeps wondering what happened to her father. But I'm glad this wasn't a light sentence, and I'm glad that it was, it was fairly significant and fairly heavy in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I was doing some research and I was looking at people had compiled all of the cops who have actually successfully been sentenced for this sort of activity, and the list is not long. It's 11 cops in the last 16 years. Out of all of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of killings, 11 have been convicted for murder for on-duty killings. What's interesting is that the average sentence is 21.7 years, almost exactly what he ended up getting. Going back 16 years, this is about where they end up, which is interesting. There's been variance, of course. There was one individual who got 40 years, some have had less. And so I guess this is comparable. It's just such a rare occurrence, it's hard to even remember when they happen. But I agree with you, Adrienne, too. The extra 10 years definitely makes this more significant, assuming that 2/3 ratio is going to end up coming into play. Without that, it would have been a very short sentence indeed. I mean, certainly long for any of us to be spending in prison, but the idea that he would potentially be out, 2 Avatar sequels from now seems hard to imagine. Now, at least it is a good chunk of the remainder of his life, even if, he will be out during the lifetimes of the surviving family members of George Floyd.
Yes, most certainly. The thing I think that we will have to see how it plays out is those existing federal charges, those indictments against him for that assault on the teenager who he was conducting an arrest and ended up hurting that child. And then in addition to that, also the federal charges for taking the life of George Floyd. Deprivation of life charge can come with significant penalties as well. And so we will really see how this plays out, but we do know that at least the people there in Minneapolis are throwing the book at Derek Chauvin, and they will likely continue to do so when they get to federal court and are facing those federal charges, unless he accepts some type of plea deal.
Yeah. I want to just mention though, I've been, like a lot of people, I was processing what I thought about, but also trying to get an impression of what a lot of other people think about the sentence. And I watched a clip of Van Jones talking about how frustrated he was. He says he knows of many people who've gotten 15 years for nonviolent, victimless drug possession crimes and things like that, which is certainly true. And the thing for me that's really influenced, I think, my evaluation of this, which I assume is playing subconsciously or consciously for a lot of people, is there's been so much that's happened since Chauvin murdered George Floyd, and yet so little of it, other than maybe this sentence, really feels like it's been affected by what happened. Like, most of the conversation about the future of police is a backlash to any attempt to change their funding levels. That feels like the dominant cultural narrative is how dare you could all be so mean to the cops coming out of last year. We had any number of different instances of police brutality, including lethal police brutality that we've been witness to over the past few months. So it doesn't seem, at least anecdotally, perhaps statistically, that it's really that the case is influencing cops' behavior. It just doesn't necessarily feel like after so much energy and passion and outrage was on display over the last year in response to this, that it's had anything proportional to that in terms of progress. I don't know, maybe this, since it's so rare that cops actually get convicted at all, maybe this is something, but it still feels so like it's coming up so short compared to all of that. I don't know, any thoughts?
Well, part of the emptiness that I feel is look, I'm glad that whenever a police officer is brought to justice, and it's happened so rarely, that accountability is a good thing, but that's only a small step, right? I mean, even a basic step that has been talked about in several state legislatures and in Congress of creating a national database of cops who violate their own procedures, get suspended or fired from their own departments so that they can't get another job in law enforcement. We don't have that database. So there was just an example of a terrible cop in Florida who's lost his job something like 10 times. How is that possible in this day and age? Well, I know that if I've got a driver's license that is somehow suspended or I've got points on it, it's gonna be difficult for me to go to a new state and transfer my driver's license. Why is it that a police officer who gets fired from his department, a reprimand, is able to go to another state, another county, and get his job? That doesn't make any sense. And I think until some of those concrete steps are taken to try to weed out the officers that we can predict are the ones who may be engaged in something like this, there will be an empty feeling and a feeling that not much has really happened to assure progress.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, Adrienne?
No, I absolutely agree. The fact is that the needle hasn't moved much since last summer. Yes, we had a lot of protests. Yes, we had issues coming out. There was some change in the private sector, but when it comes to the public sector and it comes to law enforcement in particular, yeah, a little bit of the budget may have shifted, but really, nothing has changed significantly. If not, there just seems to be more use of video cameras in recording police interactions, but nothing that really impacts policing when it comes to reform and whatnot. And we're seeing kind of this distraction and focus on critical race theory when all of these things, when we package them up, from the voting rights restrictions, the filibuster, and policing reform, this all is one big ball of white supremacy and the desire to keep it going.
You're 100% right, and I should have of course mentioned that. You're like the biggest thing that seems to be coming out of all of this after everything is don't teach kids about racism. What a sick response. Like, sick for the movement that's pushing that and the media, empire that's pushing for that and the politicians that are cynically using it. But just to be a part of a country where that has any chance of working and indeed appears to be working, it's just a sick, sick thing.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.